For 10 people, 2025 wasn't just another year, it was their final chapter. Who were they? What decisions brought them to this point? And what happened in their final moments? These are the stories of those who faced capital punishment in the United States in early 2025. This is Marion Bowman Jr., who was born in 1980. Not much is known about his early life.
In Colombia, the Department of Corrections says another death row inmate has been put to death. Marion Bowman Jr. was killed by lethal injection. Bowman said he wouldn't ask Governor McMaster for clemency after the Supreme Court rejected his final appeal.
But what is known is that he had prior run-ins with the law, including charges for theft and illegal substance possession. But nothing in his record hinted at what would come next. In 2001, Bowman reportedly got into a heated dispute with a woman named Martin, allegedly over money. The argument escalated, and at some point it turned fatal. Bowman used a firearm against her. Instead of calling for help, Bowman placed Martin's body in the trunk of her own car. Then, he set the vehicle on fire in what appeared to be an attempt to cover his tracks. The charred remains were discovered soon after, triggering an investigation that would quickly zero in on Bowman as the prime suspect. He was arrested and charged. At trial, prosecutors laid out a case built on physical evidence and witness testimony, all pointing directly to him. Bowman insisted he wasn't responsible, but the jury didn't believe him. He was found guilty and sentenced to the harshest punishment under Texas law. For more than 20 years, Marion Bowman sat behind bars, fighting to overturn his conviction. He filed multiple appeals, each time insisting that someone else was to blame for Martin's passing. But the courts weren't convinced. One by one, every appeal was denied. Then came January 31st, 2025. That day, Bowman's sentence was carried out at the Broad River Correctional Institution in Columbia, South Carolina. In his final hours, he was offered the chance to choose a last meal. His request: fried shrimp, fish, oysters, chicken wings, chicken tenders, onion rings, banana pudding, German chocolate cake, cranberry juice, and pineapple juice. In his final words, Bowman maintained that he was not responsible for Martin's passing. He expressed sorrow for her family and criticized the legal system, saying,
"I did not take Candy Martin's life. I'm innocent of the actions I am here for."
But what if such horrible behavior doesn't stop with one incident? What if it stretches across years and state lines? This is Demetrius Terrence Frazier. He was born in 1972 in Michigan. His run-ins with the law started in the early 1990s. Before he made headlines in Alabama, Demetrius Terrence Frazier was already serving a life sentence in Michigan. In 1993, he was convicted in the tragic case of 16-year-old Crystal Kendrick and linked to another incident involving Jacqueline Gresham, suggesting a pattern that stretched beyond state lines. But his timeline goes back even further. On November 27, 1991, in Birmingham, Alabama, Frazier entered the home of 40-year-old Pauline Starks Brown. He was after money. After taking what he could find, he confronted her again, demanding more. Even though she cooperated, what followed was heartbreaking. Pauline lost her life that day. The reasons behind Frazier's actions remain unclear, but his past offenses suggest deep-rooted aggression. Could his behavior have been influenced by untreated mental health issues? Frazier was convicted for what happened to Pauline Brown and sentenced to the most severe penalty under the law. In 2011, he was moved from Michigan to Alabama to face the consequences of his actions. On February 6, 2025, at the William C. Holman Correctional Facility in Atmore, Alabama, his sentence was carried out using nitrogen hypoxia. This method replaces oxygen with nitrogen, causing a person to lose consciousness and pass away. This was the fourth time Alabama used this approach. Before his sentence was carried out, Frazier requested a final meal from Taco Bell, which included a beefy 5-layer burrito, a chicken chalupa supreme, beef crunchy tacos, chips and dip, and a Mountain Dew. Before we go to his chilling final words, make sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying our content. In his final words, he apologized to Pauline Brown's family and the African American community, saying that what happened to her should not have taken place. He also criticized Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer for not stepping in on his behalf. His last words were simply,
Let's go.
but what happens when the motive isn't money or impulse, but something far more personal? In April 2001, after his ex-girlfriend ended their relationship, Sigmund didn't walk away. He sought revenge.
Of what's awaiting him on Friday. I mean, he knows what the firing squad will do to his body. He knows it's going to break his bones. He knows it's going to pulverize his organs. And it's a measure of how impossible the choice was here because of all the information about lethal injection that was concealed, that he's chosen this.
Armed with a baseball bat, he went to the home of David and Gladys Lark in Greenville County, South Carolina, his ex-girlfriend's parents. There, he targeted the couple, leaving them with fatal injuries, but he didn't stop there. After that, Sigmund forced his ex-girlfriend to leave with him against her will. He tried to escape, but authorities caught up with him soon after. What drives someone to commit something so brutal? In Sigmund's case, it appears to come down to rejection and control. When he couldn't accept the end of the relationship, he turned his anger on those closest to her, and it cost 2 people their lives. After his arrest, Brad Sigmund was charged with multiple serious offenses tied to the incident at the Larkey family's home. At trial, the jury found him guilty on all counts. Given the severity of the case, they recommended the strongest sentence allowed by law. In 2002, Sigmund was officially sentenced. He spent over 2 decades in a high-security facility. Then, on March 7, 2025, that sentence was carried out, and it marked a historic moment. Sigmund chose to face a firing squad, making him the first person in modern South Carolina history to do so. He reportedly made this decision due to concerns that other methods might cause more suffering. His choice drew national attention, not just to his case, but to the rarely used execution method itself. Before his sentence was carried out, Sigmund recited Bible verses about love and mercy. He urged Christians to stand against capital punishment, arguing that, according to New Testament teachings, his life should not be taken in return for the lives lost. For his final meal, he requested 4 pieces of fried chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes with gravy, biscuits, cheesecake, and sweet tea. In his last words, Sigmund called for an end to the death penalty, urging Christians and lawmakers to reconsider eye for an eye justice. What if someone seemed to have it all, success, confidence, even charm, but beneath the surface was something much darker? This brings us to Jesse Hoffman Jr. Jesse Dean Hoffman Jr. was born in 1978 in Louisiana. He was one of 5 children in a family that struggled with hardship. His upbringing was difficult, with reports that his mother disciplined her children harshly, sometimes using extreme measures like striking them with belts or burning their fingers as punishment. Despite these challenges, Hoffman was a strong student and athlete. He played as a quarterback and maintained excellent grades until his junior year of high school. However, his performance in school declined after entering a relationship. He graduated from Kennedy High School in 1996 and worked various jobs, including as a valet in New Orleans. On November 26, 1996, 18-year-old Hoffman approached 28-year-old advertising executive Mary Molly Elliott in downtown New Orleans. He forced her to withdraw money from an ATM at gunpoint before driving her to a remote location in St. Tammany Parish. There, he harmed her in an unspeakable way before taking her life. When questioned, Hoffman initially claimed the interaction had been consensual and that someone else was responsible for her passing. He later changed his story, saying the firearm discharged accidentally during a struggle. His trial took place in St. Tammany Parish in 1998. Evidence showed that after the incident, he used the stolen money to go shopping with his girlfriend. His legal team pointed to his troubled childhood and possible brain damage as factors to consider. However, the jury found him responsible on June 25, 1998, and 2 days later, they recommended the most severe punishment. He was officially sentenced on September 11, 1998, and transferred to a high-security facility on November 11, 1998. After years of appeals, authorities scheduled Hoffman's sentence to be carried out on March 18, 2025 by nitrogen gas, making him the first person in Louisiana to face this particular method. His attorneys argued that this approach violated his constitutional rights and interfered with his Buddhist beliefs. Despite these efforts, the sentence was carried out as planned. When the day came, Hoffman made no final statement. He also declined the option to request a special last meal. According to witnesses, the procedure lasted 19 minutes, longer than expected, and several reported visible signs of discomfort throughout. Aaron Brian Gunches was born in 1971. On November 14, 2002, Gunches went to visit his girlfriend, Kat, at her home in Mesa, Arizona. When he arrived, he found her ex-husband, Ted Price, injured and disoriented on the floor after an argument with Kat had turned physical. With help from Kat and her roommates, Gunches placed Price into his vehicle, telling him they were taking him to a bus station. However, when they realized they didn't have money for a ticket, Gunches and an acquaintance drove Price into the desert, off the Beeline Highway. When Price stepped out of the car, Gunches fired at him 4 times, leading to his passing. So what led him to commit such a horrifying act? According to Price's sister, Kat was struggling with addiction and was living in poor conditions with her 2 children, whom she shared with Price. On the day of the incident, Price reportedly threatened to call Child Protective Services because he was worried about the children's safety. In response, Kat allegedly reached out to Gunches, who was supplying her with substances at the time, and asked him to handle the situation. On January 15, 2003, during a routine traffic stop, Arizona Department of Public Safety Officer Robert Flannery pulled Gunches over. In an attempt to escape, Gunches fired at the officer twice before fleeing. A manhunt followed, and Gunches was found the next day, hiding in a haystack in Wendon, Arizona. Officer Flannery survived his injuries. In 2004, Gunches admitted responsibility for taking Price's life and for forcing him into the vehicle. In 2008, he received the most severe legal penalty. Over the years, he repeatedly asked for his sentence to be carried out as soon as possible, saying he wanted to bring closure to Price's family. In January 2025, he once again pushed for this, criticizing the delays in the process. On March 19, 2025, Aaron Gunches' sentence was carried out at the Arizona State Prison Complex in Florence. He took his last breath at 10:33 a.m. Gunches' final meal included a double Western bacon cheeseburger, 2 sandwiches, French fries, onion rings, and baklava for dessert. When asked if he had any last words, Gunches shook his head, indicating he had none. Wendell Arden Grissom was born in 1968. He was a former truck driver from Arkansas and had a history of legal troubles. Details about his early life and family background are limited, but records show he had previous convictions for illegally possessing a firearm and stealing a vehicle, among other offenses. One night in 2005, Grissom and his associate, Jesse Floyd Johns, planned to break into the home of Drew Kopf in Blaine County, Oklahoma. Inside the house were Kopf, her 2 young daughters, and her friend, 23-year-old Amber Dawn Matthews. When Grissom and Johns forced their way in, a confrontation followed. Grissom chased Matthews into a child's bedroom, where she was holding one of the children, and fired a fatal shot at her. Kopf was also shot but survived. The main reason behind the incident was theft. Grissom and Johns intended to steal valuables from the home, leading to the tragic events of that night. Later, Grissom claimed he had been under the influence of illegal substances at the time and expressed regret for what had happened. Grissom was arrested and charged with multiple serious offenses, including causing the loss of a life, shooting with intent to harm, illegally possessing a firearm due to prior convictions, and vehicle theft. In 2008, he was found guilty on all counts. The jury sentenced him to the most severe penalty allowed by law for the loss of Amber Matthews and imposed long prison terms for his other offenses. Grissom's legal team filed multiple appeals, claiming he suffered from brain damage, something the jury never heard during his original trial. They argued that this missing information could have changed the outcome, but in February 2025, the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board voted 4-1 against granting clemency, pointing to the aggressive and intentional nature of the incident. On March 20th, 2025, Grissom's sentence was carried out at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. Grissom's final meal included a medium thick-crust Canadian bacon supreme pizza, a pint of vanilla ice cream, and a pint of Coca-Cola. In his final moments, Grissom expressed remorse. He apologized to the victim's family and once again said his actions were fueled by substance abuse. It was a quiet end to a case that stirred years of legal battles and emotional debate. He said,
I apologize to all of you that I've hurt. I regret so much that I've put that hatred in your heart for me.
At 10:13 a.m., he passed away. Could his apology bring peace to the victim's family? Richard Lee Tabler was born in 1979 in Tulare County, California. His parents had a troubled marriage, and his father reportedly pressured his mother to terminate the pregnancy. Throughout his childhood, Tabler faced neglect. His father was often absent due to work commitments, infidelity, and excessive drinking, while his mother left the family when he was 10. This lack of parental support led to academic struggles, including repeating the third grade and a diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, at age 12. Richard Lee Tabler was found responsible for the tragic events that led to the passing of Mohammed Amin Rahmouni and Haitham Zayed in Killeen, Texas, in 2004. Rahmouni managed a local club where Tabler had once worked. Over time, tensions grew. On November 26, 2004, Tabler arranged to meet Rahmouni and Zayed at a remote location. What they didn't know was that it was a setup. Once there, Tabler used a .45 Ruger to shoot Rahmouni in the head, unaliving him instantly. He then turned the weapon on Zayed, firing twice into his neck. But the story didn't end there. Tabler later admitted to being involved in the passing of two teenage girls, Tiffany Dotson and Amanda Benefield. Although he was formally charged in connection with those cases, he was never brought to trial for them. Shortly after these events, Tabler was taken into custody on unrelated theft charges. When questioned by authorities, Richard Tabler didn't hold back. He openly confessed. In 2007, he was found guilty of capital charges related to Muhammad and Haitham. The jury gave him the harshest sentence under Texas law. His associate, Timothy Payne, received a life sentence for his role in the case. While behind bars, he managed to get his hands on a smuggled cell phone, something no one expected from someone under strict confinement. He used it to make threatening calls to Texas State Senator John Whitmer, triggering a major security crackdown across the state's prison system. Investigators later discovered that the phone had been smuggled in with help from Tabler's own mother. As a result, he received an additional 10-year sentence. Over time, Tabler's mental health became a growing concern. He attempted to take his own life multiple times and shifted between accepting his sentence and fighting it through appeals. In 2023, his legal road came to an end when the U.S. Supreme Court declined to review his case, removing the final barrier to carrying out his sentence. On February 23, 2025, Tabler's sentence was carried out at the Huntsville unit in Texas. In his final moments, he expressed deep regret, stating,
There is not a day that goes by that I don't regret my actions. I had no right to take your loved ones from you, and I ask and pray, hope and pray, that one day you find it in your hearts to forgive me for those actions. No amount of my apologies will ever return them to you.
As the procedure began, Tabler mouthed the words,
I'm sorry.
one final time. His breathing grew rapid, about a dozen quick, shallow breaths, and then all movement ceased. The room fell silent. But what happens when that kind of loss of control happens in a place meant for safety, reflection, and peace? Stephen LaWayne Nelson was born in 1987 in Ada, Oklahoma. From a young age, his life was marked by chaos. By age 6, he was already encountering legal trouble. As the years went on, his record grew: fights, break-ins, and theft. By 2011, he was on probation and had just finished an anger management program, only days before everything spiraled out of control. On March 3, 2011, Nelson entered North Point Baptist Church in Arlington, Texas, intending to steal. Inside, he encountered Reverend Clint Dobson and the church's secretary, Judy Elliott. He targeted both of them, suffocating Reverend Dobson with a plastic bag, which led to his passing. Elliott was severely hurt but managed to survive. He then took Elliott's credit cards, car, laptop, and phone before leaving the scene. While the main motive appeared to be just stealing, the level of aggression used raised questions about what drove Nelson's actions. His history of wrongful behavior, combined with his recent completion of an anger management program, led some to wonder whether deeper psychological issues played a role. However, this was not a major focus during his trial. Nelson was taken into custody and charged in connection with the incident. During the trial, prosecutors presented strong evidence linking him to the scene, including fingerprints, surveillance footage, and traces of the victim's DNA on his sneakers. Nelson claimed he only acted as a lookout and did not harm anyone, but the jury did not accept this defense. In October 2012, he was found guilty and received the maximum sentence under the law. His legal team filed multiple appeals over the years, arguing that he had poor legal representation and that bias may have influenced the outcome of his case. However, higher courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court, upheld the original decision, and a final date was scheduled for February 5, 2025. On that day, Nelson spoke with his wife beforehand, expressing that he was at peace with what was about to happen. His final words were directed towards his wife, saying,
"I will always love you, no matter our love is uncontrollable. I'm at peace, I'm ready to be at home. Let's ride, Warden."
James Dennis Ford was born in 1960 and had a difficult childhood. His father struggled with drinking, and his mother left the family when he was just 14. Despite these hardships, Ford remained close to his father and worked alongside him as a cemetery caretaker after leaving school. But when his father passed away in Ford's early 20s, his life took a turn for the worst. He began drinking heavily, reportedly consuming up to 24 cans of beer daily. Despite his struggles with substance use, Ford had no history of serious legal trouble and was generally seen as a quiet, calm-natured person by those who knew him. On November 17, 1997, Gregory and Kimberly Malnery, along with their 22-month-old daughter, went on a fishing trip at a Sade farm in Charlotte County, Florida, where both Gregory and Ford worked. However, what was meant to be a peaceful outing turned into a horrifying tragedy. Ford targeted the couple. Gregory suffered multiple injuries, including being struck, harmed with a blade, and shot. Kimberly also lost her life, and evidence later revealed she had suffered additional harm. Their young daughter was later found alive, but in distress, severely dehydrated and lying beside her mother. Authorities struggled to understand Ford's motivation. Given his long history of heavy drinking, some speculated that intoxication may have influenced his actions. However, the extreme level of aggression raised further questions. Investigators also explored whether there had been any previous conflict between Ford and the Malnorys, but no evidence suggested any prior issues between them. Ford quickly became a suspect due to his connection to the sod farm and the discovery of his rifle near the scene. DNA evidence linked him, Kimberly, and Gregory's DNA was found on a sharp object recovered from Ford's home. His trial began in early 1999, with prosecutors presenting strong forensic evidence, including DNA matches and the weapon used. The defense questioned the reliability of the DNA evidence and emphasized that Ford had no prior history of threatening behavior. Still, the jury found him guilty on multiple counts, including 2 charges related to the unlawful taking of life, the use of a firearm in the incident, and child endangerment. In April 1999, the jury voted 11-1 in favor of the most severe sentence, which was formally issued on June 3, 1999. After spending over 25 years in confinement, Ford's sentence was carried out on February 13, 2025, at Florida State Prison. Officials said Ford did not say any final words to the people at the execution, but he did issue a final written statement. According to WWSB, his statement said,
"Hugs, prayers, love. God bless everyone."
Ford had a final meal consisting of steak, macaroni and cheese, fried okra, sweet potato, pumpkin pie, and sweet tea. Edward Thomas James was born in 1961 in Bristol, Pennsylvania. Until the age of 10, James believed his surname was Matlack, unaware that the man raising him was his stepfather. At 11, he met his biological father for the first time. Although his father worked as a counselor, he introduced him to harmful substances and risky behavior, setting off a pattern that would shape the rest of his life. On September 19, 1993, in Castleberry, Florida, after a night of excessive illegal substance use, James broke into the home of 58-year-old Betty Dick and her 8-year-old granddaughter, Toni Neuner. He harmed both of them in a brutal manner and then stole Betty's jewelry and car. The exact reasons behind his actions remain uncertain, but his history of substance abuse, past head injuries, and a recent heart attack may have played a role in his behavior. James admitted to what he had done, pleading guilty. Despite this, the jury voted 11-1 in favor of capital punishment, and the court followed their recommendation. Over the years, his legal team filed multiple appeals, arguing that his cognitive decline and mental impairment due to substance use and health complications should be considered. However, all appeals, including those brought before the U.S. Supreme Court, were rejected. On March 20, 2025, at Florida State Prison near Stark, authorities carried out the sentence. James was declared no longer alive at 8:15 p.m. He chose not to give a final statement. So, why don't some criminals give a final statement? Is it a sign of defiance?